Oh, hello. Apparently we are live. I was waiting for someone to say hello or something like that. So hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Sabrina Brennan. I'm a psychologist and a neuroscientist, and I'm absolutely passionate about people and fascinated about how our brain works and how we can harness its power to optimize its performance and our lives. Yes, I saw that I'm going to be talking about how to stress better, sleep well, and wake up to brain health. I know that in the I know that in the talks, the bio or the brief for my talk, that it does say that I was going to tell you how to be superhuman. Well, actually, really, I'm on a mission to transform your everyday brains into super brains. I believe that the brain is the most underused resource on the planet. It is you carry around inside your head the most complex structure in the known universe. And I'd hazard a guess that you are not maximizing its performance. So that's what I'm all about, is helping people understand how their brain works and how it influences what they do and how they feel. So I just wanted to begin by letting you know that of course, change is challenging, and it can induce stress and disrupt our sleep. But the human brain evolved so that it can change and adapt. So that's a really important thing just to remember as we speak. Now, I would like you to just think about your brain, and I'm pretty sure that when you think about the human brain, you're actually thinking about something like this image here. This beige, crinkly, not very pretty organ. I suppose no organs are really pretty, but I think this sort of solid beige, it looks like a lump of fat with wrinkles all over it. And it only looks like that because it's been preserved in formaldehyde, but I think it kind of belies how brilliant your brain is. I would rather that going forward, you think about your brain as something like this. Inside your brain, you've got 86 billion neurons. That's what brain cells are called. And each of those, like those neurons, have trillions of connections. And basically, your brain communicates through those neurons and connections via electrical and chemical signals. In fact, the main function of brain cells is to transmit information. So this I should tell you that my image screen is reversed, so I'm seeing a mirror image as I'm speaking. So if my hands go in the wrong direction, forgive me. This image here is actually from a mouse brain, and scientists use special dyes to color the different neurons. It's kind of like balloons upside down. I think it's rather beautiful imagery. Looks to me a bit like a Monet painting. Google the word brainbow. This is called a brainbow, and you'll find lots of wonderful images like this. And try and think about that when you're thinking about your brain. This is another way to view your brain. This is from diffusion tensor imaging, and it gives you a sense of how your brain is firing off and sending messages and processing information all the time. It's an amazing organ. I just want to tell you a little bit about how your brain evolved because I think it's very useful in understanding things like how to manage stress and anxiety and how to change habits and things like that. So essentially, we have three brains. It just breaks up nicely to describe it like that. Of course, they're all integrated. They have masses of connections and neurons, and they're capable of talking to each other and to the rest of your body. So they're all integrated, but it just helps to divide them up this way. So the blue part of the brain, that's what you may have heard of as the brain stem. Sometimes it's referred to as the reptilian brain because from an evolutionary perspective, it's the oldest part of the brain. It is completely unconscious. The behaviors, the activities that it is responsible for are unconscious. They are not under your conscious control. So that part of the brain really keeps you alive. It looks after breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure, digestion. And if you've watched any hospital programs like ER, you'll know that if you have damaged your brain stem, you are in trouble unless you have access to a life support machine. The next part of the brain to evolve, you'd have to turn your brain sort of upside down to see it. This pink part here, it's called, it houses a number of structures called the limbic system. And it's often referred to as the emotional brain because guess what? It is sort of where emotions are processed. It also is the part of the brain that plays a big role in stress response, in the fear response, but also it's critical to learning and memory. And it's also the part of the brain that houses our unconscious biases. So that gives you a hint. That part of the brain is also unconscious, reflexive. Then what was the last to evolve, and the neocortex, neo meaning new, is the crinkly outer part of the brain that you tend to think of when you think of your brain. So it is often referred to as the thinking brain because it's where the complex activities happen, like language, decision-making, planning, all the complex things. And the front part of it, the frontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex, that was actually the last part of the brain to evolve. And it really is the part of the brain that gives humans that advantage. And this whole part, the neocortex, is packed with neurons. Excuse me. I want to tell you a little bit about the brain. That green part of the brain, your neocortex, it handles all the complex activities. And as a consequence, it is very resource heavy. It requires a lot of fuel to function. Your brain weighs only 2% of your body, but it consumes about 20 to 25% of the nutrients, the food that you consume for its energy. The thinking part of the brain requires much more fuel than those unconscious parts of the brain. So in order to make efficient use of the available resources that the brain has, it constantly scans for patterns in your behavior. So for example, you get up in the morning when the alarm rings, you go to the bathroom, you have a pee, you brush your teeth, you have a shower, you have breakfast, whatever order you do it in. If you do that regularly every single day, your brain goes, there's a pattern that I can automate, that I can save energy on. And essentially what it does is it abdicates responsibility for that group of behaviors or that routine and gives responsibility to a part of your brain called the basal ganglia, which lives in the pink part of your brain. And it is by definition unconscious and it becomes effortless, and your brain has freed up resources that it can use to do more complex tasks, like whatever you do for your job or for making decisions about your life. You and I call those automated behaviors habits. Now, one of the reasons change is challenging is and can be stressful is that you need to learn about this new behavior using this thinking part of your brain that requires a lot of energy. And so you have to consciously think about things, and that takes effort. Now, when you learn how to do something and do it then regularly, the brain will see it as a pattern and automate it. And by definition, it will require less effort and become a habit. Now, unfortunately, during lockdown, a lot of people are experiencing brain fog. Now, I know brain fog is a symptom of long COVID, but I'm talking about people in a way who are experiencing pandemic brain fog. So in a sense, brain fog is an umbrella term to describe a group of complex behaviors, complex symptoms. For example, issues with memory, language issues like difficulty finding the right word, feeling foggy, finding it difficult to concentrate or to focus, a general feeling that everything's slowing down, it's taking you longer to take in new information and process it, trouble learning new things. And I'm not talking academically, but if someone was to show you how to use a remote control, you're kind of going, sorry, hold on a second, slow down. A real mental fatigue, God, I am just too tired to think. So that's the collection of symptoms. And a lot of people have been experiencing that during lockdown, and feeling that even though they're doing less in their lives, they're not socializing, they're not entertaining, whatever, they're finding that they're far less efficient at their day job and struggling to meet targets and to work in a way that they worked, before without huge effort. And to be honest, that really has something to do with routines and patterns. Pre-pandemic, it's estimated that 40% of our behaviors were habitual. And that helps your brain function. You don't want everything to be on autopilot, but it makes sense to have some non-demanding regular tasks on autopilot so that your brain can do some of the more complex fun stuff, be creative, those kind of things. Now, if you think back to last March 2020, suddenly we were all told to work from home. So we had an additional challenge to figure out how to work from home. So that's putting pressure on the available resources. But suddenly everybody dropped their routines. People had to figure out how to homeschool. People, certainly in the first lockdown, were treating it like Christmas. They were staying up late, and because they didn't have to get up early, they weren't necessarily getting up at the same time every day. Sometimes they were staying in PJs for a few hours. Then they might get into gym gear, go for a walk. But sometimes they might homeschool at 10 a.m. or at 3 p.m. the next day. And so really, even though your brain is scanning for patterns to automate, to relieve the pressure on your thinking part of the brain, a lot of us did not engage in regular activities other than perhaps opening a bottle with dinner and eating some junk food or something in the evening time. So those behaviors became automated, but the others didn't. So the solution really to that issue, and it will help relieve stress immensely, is to reintroduce your routines, even if you are still working from home. I would suggest go back to whatever your work routine was. Get up at that time. Introduce a fake commute. It's a great way to start the day. You can just go for a walk around the block before you sit down to work, and a walk around the block afterwards. Get dressed into clothes. It doesn't have to be suits, but make the clothes that you wear for work perhaps different from the clothes that you wear at home. Make sure that you actually take a proper lunch break. It's really important. Your brain can only concentrate and take in information for certain periods of time. You might think that you're being more efficient by working through lunch and you get through more, but actually you're being inefficient and less effective, and you will be underperforming, and tasks will take longer. So take a lunch break and try to create boundaries between work and home. I often say try to make work a place rather than a thing. A thing being, that it is on our phone and we can check our emails and we can talk to people at all hours of the day. If you make it a place, it used to be a place before the pandemic where you go to and come away from. If working from home, try and pick a place where you work and, go to there at 9 a.m., leave there at 5 p.m. or whatever your working times are. If you have to use the kitchen table, clear your work away from that. Preferably find somewhere, unique to working. But I know a lot of people, house constraints won't abide for that. Avoid at all costs, really avoid working from your bedroom. It's really not good for sleep or for stress. But if you do have to do so, move everything out at nighttime. Only bring it in when you're actually working. If you can't do that, get some sort of screen to screen it off. Even a blooming box to put your stuff in, to keep that stressful stuff out of your line of vision when you're trying to sleep. Now, speaking of routines, like brushing your teeth, that's a routine that was ingrained in us from the age of about 3. And it's something that we do every day without thinking. You brush your teeth in the morning, in the evening. You visit your dentist maybe once a year. You get your teeth cleaned every 6 months. You watch what you eat. Sometimes you floss. We're not as great as the Americans at doing that. But the point I'm making is that you have a routine for your dental health. Now, what do you consciously do every day for your brain health? It's kind of crazy, really, isn't it? Now, don't get me wrong, dental health is super important because you need your teeth to eat, to speak, and to smile, but you need your brain for everything. There isn't one single thing that you can do without your brain. So brain health matters, and it's really time that people wake up to brain health, and that's kind of really where my mission comes from. Now, your brain is constantly changing, and it is your behaviors. So yeah, sleeping is a behavior, eating is a behavior, exercising is a behavior, but remember, thinking is a behavior too. Your lifestyle choices, how much you sleep, what kind of food you eat, your experiences, the experience of working away from home, or working from home, the experience of the pandemic, life experiences, falling in love, all those sort of things shape your brain. And that means that you have some control. In essence, really, what you do, and just as importantly, what you don't do, influence how resilient your brain can be in the face of challenge. And that challenge can take all sorts of forms. It can be aging, it can be injury, and it can be disease, even serious diseases like multiple sclerosis or dementia. You can be more resilient in the face of those if you have a healthy brain. The same, it will make you more resilient if you have an awful lot going on in your life and you're feeling overwhelmed. A healthy brain will help you through those challenges. And similarly, the challenge that we're all facing, or have faced from working from home, or the challenge of wondering how you're going to reintegrate, and the anxieties, etc., that you might feel about that. I kind of sort of feel I've forgotten how to live outside my house. What did I used to do in the evening times? I keep saying to myself. And I think it's that I used to travel an awful lot for work, so I wasn't home here very much in the evening times. Anyway, I like to think that adopting a brain healthy lifestyle is like investing in brain capital that allows you build up reserves of neurons and connections that you can draw on at some point in the future to cope with or compensate for disease, for challenges, for age-related decline. So it really is. It's really like banking neurons for a challenging time. So a healthy brain is a resilient brain. It has the capacity to adapt to change, and it thrives on challenge. So often these are things, change and challenge, that we feel stressed about and overwhelmed by. But actually, to stay healthy, your brain needs a certain amount of change, and it needs to be challenged. So a healthy brain, among other things, requires that you have sufficient good quality sleep every night. And it also requires that you manage stress, that you have optimum amounts of stress in your life. So if you're like a lot of people in the pandemic, you have actually noticed that you are having poor sleep, whether it's you're having trouble getting to sleep or you're having sleep disruption. Your sleep has been compromised. Also, we've all been living under a state of chronic stress, whether it is to do with the actual pandemic and fear of the disease, or having gotten the disease, or a relative dealing with it, but also the consequences. Many of us lost jobs due to the pandemic. All those things, I don't need to go into them, but they can be stressful. Now, one thing that I want to say is that stress and sleep are inextricably linked. The more stress you have in your life, the more poorly managed chronic stress you have, the less sleep that you will get. And the less sleep you have, the more stressed you will become. And that's because with insufficient sleep, the level of stress hormones remain high, because you need to go into a deep sleep every night in order to stop the release of stress hormones. And if you don't get deep sleep, the body keeps pumping those stress hormones, leaving you feeling exhausted, fatigued, irritable, and also brain fog. And that makes it hard for you to focus, to problem solve, and to maintain relationships without becoming irritable. And that in turn leads to more stress. So it's this vicious cycle can ensue. I want to say a little bit about a concept called sleep reactivity. And that is a trait-like degree to which stress disrupts sleep. So if you have high sleep reactivity like I do, you can experience a drastic disturbance to your sleep if you're coping or working through a stressful situation or period in your life. If you have low sleep reactivity, even if you are dealing with the same sort of stressors, it won't impact on your sleep. Now, as I say, it's a trait-like rather than necessarily a learned behavior. So there does seem to be a genetic element. It's somewhat heritable. Females are more likely to have high sleep reactivity than males. It depends on environmental influences and also whether there is a history of insomnia in your family. If there is, you're also more likely to have high sleep reactivity and also, unfortunately, more likely to go on to develop insomnia. So cherishing sleep is absolutely critical for your brain health and also for, if you want to blast and blow that brain fog away. And that's because when you go to sleep at night, your brain has a job of work to do. It doesn't rest and it needs you to sleep. Basically, throughout the day, when you're taking in information, and remember, your brain is an information processing piece of software in a sense. When you take in information during the day, it is stored, and I don't like to use that word because it gives a sense like it's a place. It's stored in networks in a part of your brain, in the pink part of the brain, called the hippocampus. And that part of the brain is responsible for learning and memory. And basically, when you go to sleep at night, it has a limited resource. So it's a temporary repository, really. And it needs to be cleared out at nighttime so that you can take in new information the next day. If you don't get enough sleep, it hasn't cleared out fully and it can't take in any more new information. Hence, you feel fatigued. Your brain feels full. So when you go to sleep at night, we see electrical activity between the hippocampus and the front part of the brain. And what we reckon happening there is a filtering process where this front part of your brain makes decisions about whether information needs to be kept or needs to be forgotten. It's just as important to forget information as it is to remember it because we have limited resources here in our brain. Then a little bit later in the night, we see more diffuse activity across brain networks, and that is the new information being consolidated and embedded across brain systems as memories. Then in the later part of the night or early morning, when you've got more REM sleep, the dream sleep, that new information is integrated with your existing memories, existing knowledge, existing experiences. And as a consequence, you can then wake up in the morning with solutions to problems, with idea, with insight, provided you've gone through all those cycles of sleep. Another thing that your brain has to do at nighttime, I mentioned earlier that your brain is a high energy organ. So it produces a lot of metabolic waste. Now, metabolic waste from your other organs is handled by your lymphatic system. However, your brain can't do a deep clean and be you. It just doesn't have the resources to be cleaning and working at the same time. So a bit like how the bin lorries can come around a city at nighttime when the streets are empty, your brain needs to do its deep cleaning when you are asleep. And it needs to clean out the toxins, the metabolic waste, and that includes some toxins that are implicated in Alzheimer's disease. Beta amyloid can build up, and that's a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. And we know that there's a link between poor sleep and that. So getting as much quality sleep, cherishing sleep, prioritizing sleep, doing whatever you can to get the most sleep is absolutely critical for your day-to-day functioning in terms of memory, learning, concentration, but also in terms of keeping your brain healthy and getting rid of those toxins, because your brain is amazing, but it's also very vulnerable to toxins. So ways to cherish sleep. Essentially, a regular schedule is critical. Going to bed and getting up at the same time every day. Just train your brain. It'll be tough at first, but your brain will see it as a pattern and you will start to fall into a cycle. So for an adult 24 to sort of 64, between 7 and 9 hours sleep is considered optimal. Of course, there will always be people at the tails who need a bit more or a little bit less. But quality of sleep is critical as well. You need to go through all those stages. If you miss some of those stages, you may not get the consolidating bit, you may not get the filtering bit, or you may not get the bit where it integrates. So you need to have good quality sleep. Someone could sleep 10 hours a night and wake 7 times, and they're missing some of these stages, so they will have negative impact from their disrupted sleep. your brain takes signals for the sleep-wake cycle from light. Minute you wake up in the morning, open your curtains, your shutters, etc. Get some natural daylight. If, like, living in Ireland in the wintertime, it's not bright when you wake up, turn on a white light, not a blue light from your devices, a white light. Make sure that you get out in daylight for at least a half an hour. I say at least half an hour. Try and get out for more. In the evening time, electric light and computers have, advanced, considerably, and changed how we live considerably. And they've only been around, light has only been around for a couple of 100 years. Our brain has evolved in a completely different environment, and it takes its signals from day and night. And electric light confuses the brain. So one thing I suggest is from about 8 p.m. in the evening, turn off your overhead lights, dim your lights, get more lamps in your house to start to let your brain know, oh, it's nighttime coming. And then when you do go to sleep, make sure your room is dark. Temperature is actually almost as important as light. Your core body temperature needs to drop by 1 degree in order for your body to be able to enter into the sleep mode. Now, a lot of people do things like go up and turn on an electric blanket in the bedroom, or make sure that the bedroom is warm for when they go to bed. That's not good if you want to have a good night's sleep. Essentially, turn your heat off before you go to bed, maybe an hour before you go to bed, so that you're not going to overheat, and you can let your body drop. There's a few tricks, like having a hot bath. Sounds counterintuitive, but that will lower your core temperature, because when you get out of the hot bath, the change in temperature, your vessels will rush to your extremities, your arms and your feet and your legs, away from your core body temperature, so helping to reduce that. Try and introduce a wind down at nighttime. It's not a good idea to be working right up till you go to bed, or watching TV, or using your laptop. Try and introduce a wind down routine, much as you would do with kids if any of you are parents. You don't expect kids to go from running around to lying in bed asleep. So a good hour of wind down, maybe listen to music, listen to a podcast, a relaxing podcast, or an audiobook or something like that. Make sure your bedroom is a haven for sleep. So like that, no work stuff, no televisions, no technology. Really just keep the bedroom for the 2 S's, sleep and sex. And if at all possible, have it as a calm space, a haven where you can go to relax. We're talking about caffeine, but things to avoid late at night are caffeine, alcohol, food, and exercise. They will disrupt sleep. And then what's really critical for managing, improving sleep, is to manage stress, which takes me nicely then to stress. I want to absolutely stress that there is nothing wrong with the stress response. It evolved to serve a very, very important purpose. We tend to think about it in terms of the fight or flight response, but you need that stress response to respond to challenge, to cope with change. These are things that are absolutely critical for good brain health. They're the things that get you out of bed in the morning, that motivate you, that allow you to attain your goals. So optimum levels of stress are really good. They will help you cope. However, stress becomes problematic when it becomes chronic and poorly managed. And when that happens, essentially, normally when you have a stress response, there's a cutoff system. And when the stress becomes, that says shut down the release of the hormones. But when stress becomes chronic, in addition to what happens with the sleep relationship, that mechanism seems to get a bit screwed up. And so you start to live in a chronic state of stress. Unfortunately, chronic stress actually changes the structure of your brain and how it functions. So from a functional perspective, poorly managed chronic stress will make it difficult for you to learn new things, to remember, to make memories, and to concentrate. It also sets the stage for depression and anxiety, and both of those also impair your brain functioning and can give rise to brain fog. I'll talk a little bit more about how it changes structurally, and give you a little bit of an illustration to explain how that happens. So, as I said, we tend to think about the the stress response as a fight or flight response, but it also has a role of keeping you healthy. The stress response has, let's shut unnecessary functions like the immune response and digestion down so that you can fight or flee. Then let's get back to rest and digest and get everything back in balance so that you can remain healthy. That's the entire stress response. But if we just talk about the acute fight or flight response, so if let's say you just hear a bang, a loud bang, okay? That information, that sensory information goes to your brain via two routes. One is fast and one is slow. The fast route goes directly to your amygdala. Remember, that's in the limbic part of your brain. And remember, that is unthinking, unconscious. It is reflexive. It will save your life and allow you to jump out of the way of the car or, get down on the ground if it's a gunshot or whatever, okay? Its purpose is literally that. Unthinking, milliseconds, respond. Okay, so then that same information is sent to the green part of your brain, to your neocortex, to your frontal lobes. And that part of your brain is more reflective. It actually has the many connections. It is connected. It's such a well-connected part of your brain that it can see the whole picture. It can take in past experiences. It can take in the entire environment. It basically assesses the sound that you heard in context and makes a decision that it then sends to the pink part of your brain, the amygdala, the fear center. And that could be, that was just a car backfiring. Shut down all the responses, false alarm, let's get back to rest and digest. Or it can say, oh my goodness, there's a man over there with a gun, get down, be ready to flee or, hide or whatever the sense is, right? So that is, first response is reflexive, second is reflective. Now, unfortunately, when you're become chronically stressed, neuroplasticity is a fancy name for the brain's capacity to adapt with change, to learn. And it's really good because you grow new connections and neurons, and you want your frontal lobes to get bigger and you want your hippocampus to get bigger and be well connected. Not so much with your amygdala. And really what happens is that when you become chronically stressed, neuroplasticity is actually suppressed in your frontal lobes and suppressed in your hippocampus. And that's how it impacts on the functioning, but also the structure, because if you're not growing new connections in your brain and you have brain cell loss, actually those parts of the brain can start to shrink. In contrast, during chronic stress, neuroplasticity is enhanced in the amygdala. And so essentially your amygdala gets bigger and your thinking part of the brain gets smaller. And instead of your thinking part of the brain overriding your reflexive part of the brain, the reverse happens. And so you end up being permanently on high alert, which really isn't good and has long-term impact on your memory, etc. So managing stress is critical. I want to very briefly, before I finish, explain what stress is. It is unfortunately used interchangeably to explain multiple functions of the stress response. So it's used to explain to talk about the thing that stresses us, the stressor or the threat. It's also used to describe the neurophysiological response that I've just talked about, the release of cortisol, etc., but also the psychological response, how you perceive it. Now, psychological stress refers to how we perceive that the demands placed on us exceed our ability to cope. That's when we feel psychologically stressed. And it doesn't matter whether the stressor, the threat, is real or imagined. Doesn't matter. It will kick off that neurophysiological stress response. How you respond to stress is very individual. What excites me might scare you, vice versa. So to recognize whether you're feeling stressed, some of these things, I know that might sound funny because you go, oh my God, I feel stressed, but some of them are less obvious. The feeling forgetful, that's part of the brain fog. Finding yourself narrowing your focus so that you are just working all the time and you're not making any time for recreation or play. That's, responding, trying to deal with the stressor by just focusing fully on it. Lost your sense of humor. Are you starting to eat unhealthy unhealthily, your sleep disrupted, are you feeling lonely? They're often times of stress. So key ways to address and manage stress are to be active. Physical activity is an absolutely brilliant way to manage stress. It's also a brilliant way to boost your brain performance. Exercising at lunchtime, for example, helps to counteract that natural dip in alertness that we experience, and actually improves memory and your ability to pay attention and take in new information in the afternoon. So if you find that afternoon slump is a tough time for you, that you're less focused in terms of work, go and exercise, dance, run, whatever your choice is. Social support, being connected, is really, really critical when you're feeling stressed. Reach out to other people and help other people, be realistic about what you can achieve. Most of us overestimate what we can do, and then we feel stressed because we didn't achieve what we set out to do. A good thing to do is, if you have certain tasks that you have to do in the office that you regularly have to do, or wherever you work, time them. See how long they actually take, and then use that to plan your work. But also be realistic about what other people can achieve. Being positive and being balanced in your life are also critical. And I'm going to talk more about being present and being happy. Excuse me. Don't underestimate the power of pause. Honest to goodness, your brain is so brilliant that it can do loads of things if you just give it space to do it. If you actually stop working, stop trying to solve a problem, and take a break and do something else, your brain will work away looking for the solutions and looking for patterns. It loves patterns, and it will make connections. And if you give it the space to do that, rather than trying to force and bulldoze your sense of self, thinking, we have this sense of self where we think we're totally in control and we have to make stuff happen. Trust your brain, give it the information. It will help figure things out, and you can wake up with the solution. It might take more than a few nights sleep, but honestly, trust your brain. Get offline, spend time in nature. It's really restorative. I've mentioned about the exercise at lunchtime, and relax. Now, I often think people confuse relaxing with sitting doing nothing. But basically, if you can lose yourself in a task that you enjoy, then that's as good as any meditation. And I'm going to finish here just by telling you to re-inject joy in your life. I think we've forgotten to have fun. It's okay to have fun in a pandemic. Schedule at least half an hour's fun every day. Create a laughter stash. Laughter is nature's natural stress buster. It actually lowers cortisol. And smiling actually has multiple benefits in addition to that. It actually releases serotonin, the feel-good hormones, but it lowers blood pressure, it boosts your immune function, and it helps promote the growth of brain cells. And a lot of us tend to think that smiling is reactive. You need someone to smile in order for you to smile in return. That's not true. You can smile anytime you want. Just put your muscles in that position. And research has shown, by getting people to just chew on a pencil, that you will get all those benefits. So I prescribe smiling 5 times a day. Once first thing in the morning, it's a fantastic way to start the day. Once last thing at night, it's a brilliant way to end the day on a positive note. Share at least one smile with somebody else. It gets you to get connected, and it spreads the health benefits, because it's impossible not to smile back at somebody who smiles at you. And you can do whatever you want with the other 2 smiles. I think I'm just coming up to time. If you kind of like what I talk about and the way I talk about it, I have a podcast where I talk about things like that, but also interview guests about surviving and thriving in life. If you visit my website, you'll find lots of free resources about brain health, lots of animated films, videos from me. They're all free. Share them. My book's not free, but if you're interested, you'll find information on it on my website. Thank you so much. I'm not sure now whether I'm to take questions. Okay, I'm seeing questions coming in here. Sarah, would you like me to address those questions? Yes. So I wonder, is there an optimal amount of deep sleep that we should be aiming for? Yes, absolutely. So essentially, your brain goes through five approximately 90-minute cycles across the duration of the night. And your sleep is comprised of non-REM sleep and REM sleep. So one is the dream sleep, but the proportion, the ratio of non-REM and REM sleep change across each cycle. So in the first part of the night, you've more non-REM sleep, the deep sleep, than REM, and that gradually switches so that towards the end of the night, you've more REM sleep than non-REM sleep. So really the only way to ensure that you're getting sufficient deep sleep, I often say the best thing to do is to work backwards from when you need to get up, and then get your 7 or 8 hours from them so that you don't miss out. A good way to do is kind of try a few things, keep a sleep diary. You'll see what your optimum amount of sleep is. People often say, how do I know I'm getting enough sleep? If you're waking up feeling refreshed, you're getting enough sleep. If you're waking up feeling groggy and still tired, etc., that's a good indication you're not getting enough sleep. Question from Peter. Any sleep tips for shift workers? As airline crew, we have to deal with early and late starts and finishes, also jet lag. Yeah, I'm really sorry. That is a real challenge. It does put a huge strain on the brain. Yes, jet lag is going to impact and make you feel brain foggy, etc. I think there are, you have no control over, when your shift working is going to happen. But I think that it is really important to repay a sleep debt. And try not to use coffee to do that. Coffee tricks the brain. A sleep hormone called adenosine is released. It's a sleep pressure. It's the thing that makes you feel you want to sleep. And it's telling you your brain needs sleep. Now, if you drink coffee, that actually shuts down that receptor. So all you're doing is actually preventing the message from getting through to you. You're not actually repaying a sleep debt. So using napping prophylactically or to pay back sleep. So if you think you're going to be on a shift, maybe take a nap beforehand and then again nap again, but try and then gradually move forward back into your cycle when you're not going through the shifts. But it is really important that at least, if your sleep is being disrupted because of your job, to then make sure you do other things as well that are really good for your brain. And I have lots of tips in my books and free ones on my website to find out what those other things are that you can do. Is that it? That's it? Great. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. It's so weird not being able to see anyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.